business news now, and troubled bank Credit Suisse may have secured a lifeline from the Swiss Central Bank, but it received no mercy from the European Central Bank, which raised interest rates earlier despite recent chaos in the financial sector. European banking shares fell sharply on Wednesday amid fears that the 167-year-old Swiss institution was on the brink of collapse. Switzerland's central bank agreed to a line of credit, albeit one viewed as too small to provide lasting support. Despite this, the president of the ECB maintains that European banks are safe.
We are monitoring current market tensions closely and stand ready to respond as necessary to preserve price stability and financial stability in the euro area. The euro area banking sector is resilient with strong capital and liquidity positions. In any case, our policy toolkit is fully equipped to provide liquidity support to the euro area financial system if needed, and to preserve the smooth transmission of monetary policy. I think that the banking sector is currently in a much, much stronger position than where it was back in 2008.
That's Christine Lagarde, who's president of the European Central Bank. Now let's cross over to London, where Rise Business correspondent Laurie Laird is standing by. Laurie, will get to the European Central Bank in a moment, but first let's go back to that breaking news out of Paris. What's been the reaction to President Macron bypassing Parliament to raise the retirement age?
Extraordinary story, isn't it, Charles? That's right. President Macron's flagship legislation was to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. He has been talking about this since his first term in office. At the last minute, he could not muster the support of the National Assembly. That's the lower house of Parliament. The Senate, the upper house, had passed the bill earlier today. Realizing he didn't have the support, he pulled the bill. His prime minister, Elizabeth Borne, passed it by fiat. She used a bit of the Constitution that allows a French government to bypass the legislature to enact a law. Extraordinary stuff. And the scenes in Parliament were incredible. Left-wing MPs booed the prime minister, then stood up and sang the national anthem outside of the Parliament. Pop-up protests all over the country, in Paris and in many of the regions. Charles, if Labour was not upset with Emmanuel Macron before this, they are absolutely hopping mad right now.
Well, I guess the question, Laurie, is how damaging is all this, and will his presidency survive it?
Well, I mean, he is a second-term president, and this is, I think, why he had the courage to bring this in his second term. He talked about it in his first term and never got very far with it. The opposition in Parliament has 24 hours to call a vote of confidence. If that vote of confidence passes, the Parliament is dissolved. Fresh elections will be upon us. Now, Emmanuel Macron almost dared some of the deputies to enact this, to call this vote of confidence. We understand last night that he threatened to dissolve Parliament himself to try and get this vote through with legislative support. Now, the Republicans, which are the third biggest party in Parliament, or the third biggest grouping in Parliament, they have said that they will not support a no confidence motion. However, they also said a couple of weeks ago that they would support the raising of the retirement age. So it's not entirely clear how they will come down on this.
Well, let's move on to the European Central Bank, Laurie. A fairly aggressive rise in interest rates despite the recent chaos in the European banking sector.
That's right, Charles. The ECB really had backed itself into a corner. At their last meeting in January, they said that they pre-announced a rate hike. They raised 50 basis points at that point and said we will be raising 50 basis points again. Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, has in many interviews stuck by that. So they really couldn't back down from that. However, she did not commit to any further rate hike. So that is telling. When she was asked whether rates have peaked, she really deflected the question. But she did say, and as we saw her a few moments earlier, she did express confidence that the European banking system is in reasonably good shape.
And Laurie, we've got just over a minute. In the context of news that there's fresh trouble with a US bank, I wonder if the Federal Reserve will follow the ECB and continue the fight against inflation.
That is the question. That's what we are all talking about, Charles. Earlier in the week, people were talking about the possibility of the Fed actually cutting rates when it meets next week. I think that sort of speculation is off the table. Much of the banking market has stabilized, although I think there's still a lot of banana skins out there. But the betting is still that the Federal Reserve will not enact a 50 basis point hike, that they'll go 25 basis points, or maybe even stay still, maybe not touch rates at all. So we're talking about this all through the next week. That will be all that markets are focusing on over the next week.
Laurie, thank you ever so much. Laurie Laird, Arise business correspondent, talking to me there from London.